Welcome to the channel. Before we dive into tonight's journey through the bizarre biology of memory, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment telling us where you're listening from and what time it is right now. Whether it's midnight in Tokyo or 3 a.m. in Toronto, we love hearing from you. Now get comfortable, close your eyes if you'd like, and let your mind drift as we explore the strange and fascinating biology behind how we remember, and sometimes forget, memory. It's something so fundamentally woven into our daily experience that we often take it for granted. We remember birthdays, the smell of a loved one's cooking, the way a childhood bedroom looked on a rainy afternoon. But what if I told you that memory, as you know it, is largely an illusion? Not because it's not real, but because it doesn't work the way we think it does. You see, memory is not like a video recording of your life. It's more like a fragile collage, constantly being cut up, edited, and pasted back together. Every time you remember something, you're not replaying a file, you're reconstructing it. And during that reconstruction process, errors, emotions, and biology shape what you think happened. The process of memory starts with perception, what your senses take in. But perception is already biased. Your brain filters what it deems important. Most of what happens around you never even makes it into short-term memory. Your mind decides what's worth remembering before you're even aware of it. Once something grabs your attention, it enters short-term memory. And from there, with enough repetition or emotional impact, it might consolidate into long-term memory. But here's the twist. Long-term memories aren't stored in just one place. They're fragmented, distributed across the brain in regions like the hippocampus, amygdala, and prefrontal cortex. That's right, your memory of your grandmother's face isn't stored in a single neuron labeled grandma. It's scattered like puzzle pieces across the brain and reassembled every time you recall it, which means every memory you recall is slightly different than the one before. This is not a flaw. It's how memory works. Let's go even deeper. In the early 1900s, a neuroscientist named Carl Lashley tried to find the engram, the physical location of memory in the brain. He trained rats to run through a maze and then surgically removed parts of their brains to see if they forgot the path. Surprisingly, he found that no single area of the brain seemed to hold the memory. No matter what section he removed, the rats retained some ability to navigate the maze. This led to the theory that memory is distributed and not localized. And while we've refined that understanding in modern neuroscience, the basic idea holds true. Memories are patterns across networks, not single files on a mental hard drive. But what happens when these networks fail? There are rare conditions that show us just how strange memory can be. Consider transient global amnesia, a condition where someone suddenly forgets everything from the past few hours and can't form
new memories. It lasts for several hours and then everything returns. No brain damage, no lasting effects, just a hole in the narrative of life, like a skipped chapter in a novel. Or take hyperthymesia, a condition where individuals can recall nearly every day of their lives in vivid detail. They don't choose to remember, it just happens. Their memories are like involuntary time machines, replaying everything from what they ate on June the 2nd, 1997, to the weather on their 4th birthday. Scientists believe this condition is linked to a larger than average amygdala and more activity in the temporal lobe, regions involved in emotion and memory. But why some people have this ability and others don't remains a mystery. And then there's the even stranger reality of false memories. Studies have shown that it's incredibly easy to implant false memories into someone's mind. In one experiment, participants were told a fabricated story about being lost in a shopping mall as a child. A significant number of them not only believed it, they recalled details, emotions, even what they were wearing. Why does this happen? Because memory isn't just biological, it's deeply social. Our memories are shaped by stories we're told, emotions we feel, and even the way questions are asked. The brain doesn't prioritize accuracy. It prioritizes meaning, coherence, and emotional relevance. This raises a troubling question. How much of what we remember actually happened? And how much of our identity, our very sense of self, is built on a shifting foundation of reconstructed, emotional fragments? As we drift further into this strange biological realm, we'll explore how memories are made, stored, and sometimes even erased. We'll travel from the neurons that fire together to the chemicals that shape our thoughts, to the mechanisms that let us remember a face, forget a trauma, or even rewrite the past. So, settle in. Let your thoughts relax. The story of memory is just beginning. To understand memory, we need to enter the microscopic world of the brain itself, a vast and intricate network of cells, chemicals, and electrical signals. Here, in the quiet spaces between neurons, the first whispers of memory are born. Your brain contains approximately 86 billion neurons. Each one connects to thousands of others, forming trillions of connections called synapses. These connections aren't static. They change, strengthen, and weaken over time. A process known as synaptic plasticity. And it is within this plasticity that memory lives. The idea that neurons that fire together wire together is more than just a catchy phrase. It's the core of how learning and memory work.
When two neurons repeatedly activate in sequence, the synapse between them becomes stronger. It's like a trail in the forest. The more you walk it, the more defined the path becomes. This is called long-term potentiation, or LTP. LTP was first discovered in the 1970s in the hippocampus, a brain region critical for forming new memories. When researchers stimulated certain neurons repeatedly, they found that the connection became easier to activate.
That is, the memory became easier to recall. But memory isn't just about electrical pulses, it's also deeply chemical. When a memory is formed, neurotransmitters like glutamate and acetylcholine flood the synaptic space, triggering a cascade of changes within the cell. Proteins are produced, receptors move, genes turn on and off. These changes stabilize the synapse, making it more responsive in the future. This chemical ballet doesn't just happen instantly. It continues for hours or even days after the initial experience. That's why sleep is so critical for memory. During deep sleep, your brain replays recent experiences, consolidating them, reinforcing them, and filing them into long-term storage. But the biology goes even deeper. Inside the cell's nucleus, a process called epigenetic modification takes place. This means that the experience doesn't just change the connections between neurons, it changes which genes are expressed in each neuron. In other words, memory can alter your genetic landscape. Temporary experiences can leave permanent marks on the architecture of your mind. This is one of the great marvels of biology. Your experiences, fleeting, emotional, ordinary, can etch themselves into your physical being. Now, what happens when this delicate system goes wrong? Take Alzheimer's disease, one of the most devastating disorders of memory. It begins with the gradual buildup of toxic proteins, beta amyloid plaques outside neurons and tau tangles inside them. These disrupt the communication between brain cells and eventually cause the cells to die. The hippocampus, the very heart of memory, shrinks first. That's why one of the earliest symptoms is the loss of recent memories. As the disease progresses, it spreads to other parts of the brain, stealing away language, recognition, even personality. But the biology of memory dysfunction isn't always so tragic. Sometimes it's curiously specific. There are cases of highly localized amnesia, where a person forgets only a particular type of memory, like faces, or names, or how to ride a bike. This suggests that different types of memory are stored and processed in different regions of the brain. Procedural memory, like how to ride a bicycle or tie your shoes, is managed by the basal ganglia and cerebellum.
areas of the brain responsible for movement and coordination. Declarative memory, facts and events, is tied to the hippocampus and medial temporal lobes. Emotional memories, like the fear of snakes or the warmth of a mother's hug, are stored with the help of the amygdala, a small almond-shaped structure that gives color to our recollections. And when these areas are damaged by injury, stroke, or disease, entire categories of memory can vanish. But perhaps even stranger is the phenomenon of savant syndrome, where individuals with severe mental disabilities display astonishing memory abilities. They might recall every detail of a book after a single reading or play a symphony after hearing it once. One famous case is Kim Peek, the inspiration for the movie Rain Man. Despite being unable to tie his shoes or live independently,
He could read 2 pages of a book at once, one with each eye, and remember nearly everything he read. How is this possible? Some theories suggest that in the absence of typical cognitive filters, the brain stores raw sensory information in its entirety, without editing or prioritizing. In other words, where most of us forget in order to function, savants remember because their brains lack the mechanism to forget. This hints at a truth both profound and unsettling. Forgetting is not a failure. It is a feature. It's the brain's way of clearing clutter, reducing noise, and focusing on what matters most. We'll explore forgetting in more detail soon. But first, let's marvel at one more biological marvel of memory. The fact that we can, in some cases, erase it. In groundbreaking experiments, scientists have used drugs and targeted stimulation to weaken or erase specific memories in lab animals. By interfering with the molecular processes involved in memory consolidation, they could cause an animal to forget a learned fear response. This research is controversial and ethically complex, especially when applied to humans. But it opens up incredible possibilities for treating trauma, PTSD, or addiction, conditions in which memory becomes not a tool, but a trap. Imagine being able to selectively dull the emotional weight of a memory, not delete it, but take the sting away. Memory is not just biology. It's biology in service of meaning. It's how we write the stories of our lives. And those stories are about to get even stranger. Memory, as wondrous as it is, would be unbearable without its twin, forgetting. We often think of forgetting as a flaw, an unfortunate failure of the mind. But in reality, forgetting is essential. Imagine if your brain remembered every sensation, every noise, every face, every word you've ever encountered. The sheer weight of it would drown your ability to focus, adapt, or make decisions. In fact, forgetting is not a passive process. It's active, it's structured, and it's built into the biology of your brain. There's a concept in neuroscience called synaptic pruning. As we grow, especially in childhood and adolescence, our brains are flooded with neural connections, but not all of them are useful. So the brain trims away the weak or unused ones to strengthen the important paths. It's like a gardener cutting back overgrowth so that sunlight can reach the healthiest branches. This pruning is a kind of forgetting, and it's critical for learning. By letting go of the irrelevant or obsolete, your brain makes room for the vital and the new. But this process doesn't stop with childhood. Even in adulthood, your brain is constantly managing and shedding memories. Think of it like a hard drive, one that is always optimizing itself for speed and efficiency. If a memory isn't accessed, rehearsed, or emotionally charged, it fades. In psychological terms, this is called decay theory, the idea that memories weaken over time simply because they're not used. But there's more to it than time. Enter interference theory. Sometimes we forget not because of time, but because new memories interfere with old ones. This is why you might forget your old phone number after memorizing your new one, or mix up your current password with the last one you used. And then there's motivated forgetting, when your brain lets go of memories for emotional reasons. Sigmund Freud once described repression as a psychological defense mechanism, and while modern neuroscience doesn't frame it quite the same way, the concept still holds weight. We know that trauma can cause selective amnesia. People who've endured car accidents, combat, or abuse often report blank spaces in their memory, periods where the mind seems to have blacked out. In some cases, the memory returns years later, sometimes triggered by a smell, a face, or a place. But what if we could choose what to forget? Some research suggests we can. In controlled experiments, people were shown a series of images and then told to try and forget certain ones. Brain scans revealed reduced activity in the hippocampus when participants made a deliberate effort to suppress the memory. While not foolproof, it suggests that we do have some degree of control over forgetting. And that brings us to one of the strangest ideas in modern neuroscience: active unlearning. This theory proposes that the brain doesn't just forget passively, but that it actually unlearns memories that are no longer useful.
It may do this by weakening the neural pathways that support the memory, or by building new ones that overwrite the old. It's as if your brain were a painter, constantly layering new brushstrokes over the canvas of your experience. But here's where it gets even more bizarre. Some researchers now believe that forgetting is actually part of remembering. That is, when you recall a memory, your brain destabilizes it, opens it up for editing, and then stores it again. During this process, some parts are strengthened while others fade. This is called reconsolidation, and it suggests that every time you remember something, you are, in fact, changing it. Imagine opening a book to read a chapter, but every time you do, the chapter rewrites itself just a little. That is memory. And this mechanism of reconsolidation is at the heart of cutting-edge therapies. In exposure therapy for PTSD, patients are guided to recall traumatic memories in safe settings. As the memory is reactivated and reprocessed, the emotional weight can be reduced. Over time, the brain learns that the trauma no longer poses a threat. The memory isn't erased, but it's rewritten. Forgetting, then, is not failure. It is adaptation. It's the mind's way of clearing space for new growth. And even the act of forgetting is a kind of remembering, a remembering of what matters most. Now consider this. What if some things aren't meant to be remembered? Your brain filters your experience from the very beginning. Out of the millions of sensory inputs you receive every second, only a tiny fraction are ever noticed, let alone stored. This is called selective attention, and it determines what even makes it to short-term memory. From there, your working memory, essentially your mental scratch pad, decides whether to hold on to the information. This system is incredibly limited. Most people can hold about 7 pieces of information at once, give or take a few. So if your memory is like a filter, and forgetting is a design, then what you remember is not a perfect record. It's a curated experience, your story, told through fragments, colored by feeling and sculpted by time. So the next time you forget where you left your keys or what you ate for lunch last Tuesday, remember this: your brain is not broken. It's beautifully selective. It's not storing your life. It's shaping your life. There are memories we long to preserve. First kisses, old friendships, joyful celebrations. But not all memories are welcome. Some come uninvited, creeping into consciousness like shadows under a locked door. These are traumatic memories, and they behave differently than ordinary ones. When we experience something emotionally intense, especially something terrifying or painful, our brain doesn't process it the same way.
The amygdala, the brain's emotional alarm system, kicks into overdrive. It floods the body with adrenaline and stress hormones like cortisol. Your senses sharpen, your heart pounds, your attention narrows, and this flood of emotion engraves the moment into your memory. But here's the paradox. While trauma often leads to vivid memories, sharp, intrusive, unforgettable, it can also lead to memory loss. In some cases, people completely forget the traumatic event. In others, they remember fragments, snapshots, sounds, sensations, but not the full picture. Why is that? The answer lies in how trauma affects the hippocampus, the brain region responsible for forming and organizing memories. Under extreme stress, the hippocampus can become disrupted, like a compass thrown off by a magnetic field. As a result, memories may be stored incompletely or without proper context. That's why many trauma survivors report flashbacks, sudden, vivid re-experiences of the trauma that feel real, as if they're happening in the present. These are not just memories, they're sensory replays, often triggered by sights, sounds, smells, or even emotions. It's as if the brain pressed record during the trauma, but never found the stop button. One of the most haunting aspects of traumatic memory is how involuntary it can be. Unlike a normal memory, which we retrieve intentionally, traumatic memories often force themselves into awareness. A loud noise might trigger the memory of a bomb blast. The smell of smoke might evoke a house fire. A raised voice might recall childhood abuse. These are not metaphorical connections. They are neurological echoes, the brain associating present stimuli with past pain and reactivating the entire network. In people with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, this pattern becomes entrenched. The brain becomes hypervigilant, constantly scanning for threats. The amygdala is overactive. The hippocampus may shrink. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for reasoning and emotional regulation, struggles to maintain control. But there's hope. Modern therapy has developed powerful tools to help. People reshape traumatic memories. One of the most effective is EMDR. Eye movement, desensitization and reprocessing. In this technique, the patient recalls the traumatic memory while simultaneously engaging in a form of bilateral stimulation, often moving the eyes side to side. This process seems to help the brain refile the memory in a way that reduces its emotional intensity. Another approach is trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, where patients learn to challenge and reframe the beliefs that arose from the trauma, like, "I'm not safe," or "it was my fault." Over time, this can reshape the memory itself. Then there's propranolol, a beta blocker that, when taken during memory reactivation, may reduce the emotional strength of the memory. It doesn't erase the memory, but it may soften its grip. This opens up an extraordinary question. Can we edit memory? Can science give us a way to keep the knowledge, but lose the pain? And if we could do that, should we? It's a question with no easy answer. Memory, after all, is part of identity. Even painful memories shape who we are. They teach us, they warn us, they form the narrative arc of our lives. But when memory becomes a prison, intervention becomes mercy. And yet, trauma isn't always born from violence. Some of the most persistent, painful memories come not from war or disaster, but from smaller, quieter wounds, abandonment, betrayal, humiliation. In these cases, the trauma isn't one event, it's a pattern, a slow, persistent erosion of safety and self-worth. And the memories don't scream, they whisper, but they stay, sometimes for decades. This is where therapy does some of its most important work, not erasing memories, but recontextualizing them, helping people separate the memory from the meaning, helping the brain understand that what once was dangerous is no longer. We don't always get to choose what we remember, but we can choose how we relate to it, and that changes everything. So, as you lie here now, listening in the soft dark, know this: your mind is not broken for remembering. It is doing what it was built to do: protect, process, survive. And you are not alone in carrying strange memories. We all do. Imagine, just for a moment, that your most painful memory, perhaps something that's haunted you for years, could be rewritten, not deleted entirely, but altered, reframed, softened. What would that mean for who you are? Would it change you? Would you still be you? This is no longer the stuff of science fiction. We are entering an era where memory, long considered sacred and untouchable, is becoming editable. Let's begin in the lab. Over the past 2 decades, scientists have begun to understand reconsolidation not as a quirk of memory, but as a fundamental feature. Remember, every time you recall a memory, it becomes temporarily unstable. Like wet clay, it can be molded again, reinforced, diminished, or reshaped before it sets once more. This window of instability lasts for minutes to hours, and during that window, interventions can change the memory's emotional tone or even alter its content. In Experiment. Researchers taught rats to associate a tone with a mild electric shock. The rats would freeze when they heard the tone, a sign of fear conditioning. But when the researchers reactivated the memory of the tone and shock, then gave the rats a drug that blocked protein synthesis, they found something shocking. The memory was gone. The rats no longer froze. The fear was erased. In humans, we're not erasing memories with chemicals, but we are learning how to diminish their emotional weight. When someone recalls a traumatic experience and then takes a drug like propranolol, the emotional arousal tied to that memory can be reduced. The memory remains, but it no longer triggers the same fear or anxiety. This has profound implications for the treatment of PTSD, phobias, and even addiction. In addiction treatment, for instance, craving is often tied to cue-induced memory. Seeing a lighter, a bottle, or a place can trigger intense urges. But what if those cues no longer held power? What if we could, at a neurological level, break the link between trigger and response? That's the promise of memory reconsolidation therapy, and clinical trials are underway. But even more futuristic approaches are on the horizon. In 2013, scientists at MIT made headlines when they implanted a false memory into the brain of a mouse. Yes, implanted. They used a technique called optogenetics, which involves inserting light-sensitive proteins into neurons. First, they allowed a mouse to explore a safe, neutral environment while tagging the neurons that encoded the memory of that place. Then, they placed the mouse in a new, frightening environment, one where it received mild shocks. But here's the trick. While the mouse was in the frightening place, the researchers activated the neurons from the neutral memory using light. The brain became confused and rewrote the memory of the safe space as dangerous. Later, when the mouse returned to the original safe space, it showed fear, even though nothing bad had ever happened there. In essence, the mouse remembered being shocked in a place where no shock had occurred. This experiment proved that memories are not just vulnerable, they can be manipulated, even fabricated. Of course, human memory isn't as simple as a mouse's, but we are discovering similar vulnerabilities. Let's revisit the concept of false memories in people. In a famous study by psychologist Elizabeth Loftus, participants were shown doctored photos of themselves as children riding in hot air balloons, a thing that had never happened. Over time, many participants came to remember the event.
Some even recalled specific details: the color of the balloon, the feel of the wind, what they were wearing. This phenomenon, called memory implantation, shows that suggestion, especially when paired with imagery, can seed entirely fictional memories. And if those memories are emotionally charged, they can feel as real as any lived experience. It's deeply unsettling, but it also reveals something essential. Memory is not truth, it is narrative. Your brain doesn't store a perfect log of the past. It
Builds stories, it fills gaps, it rewrites scenes, and it does this not to deceive you, but to help you survive. Now, what happens when technology gets involved? We are on the edge of neurotechnological memory editing, a field blending neuroscience, AI, and neurostimulation. Researchers are developing transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS, and deep brain stimulation, DBS techniques that can alter neural activity in specific memory circuits. While originally designed to treat depression and Parkinson's, these technologies may soon be refined to target memory processes. In theory, we could amplify certain memories, say, the feeling of pride during a personal achievement, or dampen others, like the pain of a breakup. We might even be able to selectively enhance learning, making it easier to retain new languages, skills, or academic knowledge. But here lies the ethical dilemma. If we can edit memory, who gets to decide which memories are worth keeping? Could governments, corporations, or even individuals begin to curate their own pasts? What happens to justice when memory becomes malleable? What happens to love? If someone could erase all memories of an ex-lover, would they still fall in love the same way again? Would heartbreak still teach resilience, or would we lose something human in the process? The 2004 film Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind explored this very question. In it, characters undergo a procedure to erase memories of failed relationships, but the story ends where it began. Two people falling in love, perhaps doomed to repeat the same pain. Because memory isn't just about what happened, it's about who we are. Even painful memories have meaning. They carry lessons. They sculpt character. So while memory manipulation holds promise, especially for healing trauma, we must tread carefully. Science may give us tools to change the past, but wisdom tells us to honor what the past gave us. Still, the future continues to approach. Companies are developing memory prosthetics, devices that can record, store, and potentially replay memories
by interfacing with the brain's electrical signals. The military is funding research to help soldiers with brain injuries recover lost memories using neural implants. In time, we may have memory backups, downloadable recall, neural archives. Imagine remembering your child's first words, not just vaguely, but perfectly, as if reliving it, or recalling the taste of a meal, the voice of a lost parent, the way a loved one laughed, not as memory, but as experience. It's breathtaking and terrifying, because if we can record memories, we can share them, and if we can share them, we can steal them, hack them, change them. So the bizarre biology of memory becomes not just a question of neurons and proteins, but of ethics, philosophy, and identity. What are we if not our memories? And who do we become when memory is no longer our own? What if the version of you listening to this right now is not the same person who woke up this morning? Not in a metaphorical sense, but quite literally. A different mental construction shaped by altered
Patterns and shifted memories that subtly but significantly redefine who you are. You see, memory is not just a record of the past, it is the architecture of the self. It is the invisible thread that ties together your identity, stretching back across years, decades, and even imagined futures. Without memory, there is no sense of continuity, no internal narrator connecting the moment you first learned to ride a bike with the person paying bills today. No arc, no story, just moments, disconnected, floating in the dark. Philosophers have long wrestled with this idea. The 17th century thinker John Locke proposed that personal identity is grounded in memory. You are not your body, nor even your mind, but the chain of consciousness created by what you remember. In Locke's view, if you remember being a child, then you are that child. If you forget, then the connection is broken. Your past self becomes a stranger. This notion becomes eerily relevant when we consider patients with severe amnesia, those who lose the ability to form new memories. Some are frozen in time, reliving the same few minutes over and over with no sense of progress. They wake each day believing it is still 2005, or that they are still 22 years old. Their past is intact, but their future never arrives. It's not just memory that's damaged, it's identity. Because who can truly be said to exist if they cannot carry themselves forward into tomorrow? On the other end of the spectrum, Consider those who forget their past. Victims of retrograde amnesia may know how to speak, eat, and walk, but they cannot remember their name, their family, or their history. Their procedural memory remains, but the narrative is gone. Are they still the same person? If you were to lose every memory of your past but retain your skills and preferences, would you still be you? And what about false memories? If you vividly remember a moment that never happened, and that memory has shaped your beliefs, your decisions, your emotions, does it matter whether it's real? Is a life-altering lie still a valid building block of selfhood? Here's a chilling thought. Your memory has betrayed you more times than you can count, and you will never know. Studies show that human memory is astonishingly unreliable. Witness testimonies in court, for example, are riddled with error, not because people lie, but because the act of remembering is deeply flawed. Our brains fill gaps, invent context, blend timelines. They prioritize emotion and coherence over accuracy, and this makes perfect evolutionary sense. Memory didn't evolve to be a perfect archive. It evolved to help you survive, to warn, to guide, to teach. A lion's roar, a burning flame, a face filled with rage. These impressions needed to be stored, not precisely, but persuasively. Your brain remembers what it must and forgets the rest, often without asking your permission. The self, then, is not a solid structure, but a story being constantly rewritten. A collection of memories, both real and imagined, stitched together with emotion and belief. The you of today is built not on unchanging facts, but on fluid recollections. You are a novel with many drafts, some chapters revised, some erased, some embellished. This is not a failure, it is a feature. It is what makes us flexible, adaptable, resilient, but it's also what makes identity fragile. In dissociative identity disorder, DID, formerly known as multiple personality disorder, we see what happens when memory and identity fragment. Individuals with DID may possess distinct identities, each with their own memories, behaviors, even handwriting. These identities may be unaware of each other or may compete for control. Memory becomes a partitioned landscape with locked doors and secret rooms. The self becomes plural. What causes this fracturing? Often overwhelming trauma. The mind, in a desperate bid for survival, compartmentalizes experience. It is memory, once again, that both saves and separates. On the flip side, there are those rare individuals with highly superior autobiographical memory. People who can recall with astounding clarity nearly every day of their lives. At first, it sounds like a gift, but many describe it
as a burden. They cannot forget pain, cannot move on. Every embarrassment, every insult, every grief lives in the mind as vividly as yesterday. And so memory is both a mirror and a maze. It reflects who we are, but can also trap us in endless loops. Ask yourself now, who would you be if you forgot your proudest moment, your deepest love, your worst mistake? Would you be free or lost? Memory is often framed as a solitary phenomenon, your private archive, tucked away inside the folds of your brain. But memory doesn't live in isolation. It breathes, grows, and sometimes withers in the presence of others. Your memories are shaped not just by biology, but by community, by the people you talk to, the stories you hear, and the culture you inhabit. From the moment we begin to speak, our memories become social constructions. You learn to tell stories of what happened at school or what you did on your birthday, and in the telling, you shape the memory. You emphasize what got laughs, what drew concern. The way people respond begins to mold your recollection, and over time, the story and the memory become one. This process, called narrative memory, doesn't just help you make sense of events, it helps you belong. Shared stories create shared identity. A family might pass down a tale about a grandfather's bravery or a great-grandmother's migration across continents. These stories become vicarious memories, not remembered through direct experience, but inherited. And yet, they still feel deeply personal. This kind of intergenerational memory is particularly powerful in communities that have experienced collective trauma, war, displacement, genocide. Children of Holocaust survivors, for example, may carry vivid mental images of events they never witnessed, constructed from photos, testimonies, and family silence. These inherited memories shape identity, belief, and even behavior. But how far does this go? Recent research in epigenetics suggests that memory, or at least its emotional residue, might be carried in. The body, passed down biologically. In animal studies, mice exposed to trauma, like the scent of cherry blossoms paired with electric shocks, later had offspring who feared that same smell, even without ever encountering it before. Their DNA had not changed, but the expression of certain genes had. The trauma left a molecular scar, a hint that memory can ripple down generations, beyond brain, beyond narrative, beyond words. And then there's collective memory, which lives not in individuals, but in societies. Nations remember wars. Cities remember disasters. Cultures remember myths. These memories are embedded in rituals, memorials,
textbooks, films. They are shaped by politics, religion, and ideology. They are edited, contested, rewritten over time, and yet they anchor communities to a sense of shared history. Take, for example, the memory of 9/11 in the United States. For those who lived through it, the images are burned into personal memory. But for those born afterward, the memory is mediated, learned through documentaries, school lessons, public commemorations. Still, it's real. It affects how they see the world. This dynamic plays out everywhere, from remembrance of colonialism to the legacy of slavery, from revolutions to mass migrations. What we remember and how we remember it shapes what we believe is possible. And just as individuals can repress painful memories, so can societies. Some atrocities are buried, others are mythologized. Memory becomes power. Even the act of forgetting is often social. Languages go extinct. Rituals are abandoned. Sites of memory are bulldozed. And just like that, a piece of cultural memory vanishes. Not because the biology of remembering failed, but because no one kept telling the story. This leads to an important truth. Memory is not just preserved in neurons, but in narratives. And narratives can be lost, or worse, manipulated. In the digital age, memory has entered a new dimension. Our memories are increasingly outsourced, stored in phones, servers, cloud accounts. We remember birthdays because a calendar reminds us. We remember what we looked like 10 years ago because Facebook shows us. We remember vacations through photos, events through hashtags. This is externalized memory, and it's both a miracle and a danger, because digital memory is editable, deletable, it's curated. You can crop out the pain, filter the truth, rewrite your past in a slideshow, and yet your brain begins to believe the curated version, forgetting the raw, unedited one. So we ask again, what is real? If enough people believe a memory, does it become history? If a truth is forgotten by all, did it ever really happen? These are not abstract questions. They shape justice, identity, and morality. Because memory is not just about the past, it is how we navigate the future. Time moves forward, or so we believe. It takes, it passes, it marches. Seconds accumulate into minutes, into hours, into years. But memory doesn't obey the laws of time. single scent can transport you decades into the past. This temporal distortion reveals something profound. Memory is not just a record of time. It is how we experience time. Your sense of duration, of chronology, of past, present, and future is not dictated by clocks or calendars. It is constructed, assembled from snapshots, feelings, and patterns by your brain. That's why time seems to slow during a crisis and race during joy. Why childhood summers feel endless in hindsight, while adult years pass in a blur. The hippocampus, our memory's gatekeeper, plays a central role in this temporal perception. It doesn't just file events, it organizes them in sequences. This function, sometimes called temporal binding, helps you understand cause and effect, storylines, and the progression of your own life. But when the hippocampus is damaged, this structure collapses. People may remember isolated facts or feelings, but lose the ability to place them in a timeline. The past becomes scattered, like pages torn from a book and thrown into the wind. And yet, memory doesn't need linearity to feel real. In dreams, we often experience temporal fusion, a sensation where the past and present coexist. You might be your childhood self talking with someone from your current life in a place that doesn't exist. The memory elements are familiar, but their combination is surreal. This dreamlike quality is also present in déjà vu, that uncanny feeling of having lived a moment before. Some researchers believe this happens when the brain's memory systems misfire, specifically when a new experience briefly activates areas associated with familiarity, even though it's happening for the first time. The result? A trick of memory that bends time into a loop. But there's an even deeper question. Can memory move forward? At first glance, no. Memory is retrospective. It recalls. It looks back. But consider this. Your brain constantly simulates the future. It rehearses conversations, imagines outcomes, visualizes decisions. This process, known as prospective memory, is built on the same neural machinery as episodic memory. The same networks that remember your last birthday also imagine your next one. In a way, your ability to remember is inseparable from your ability to predict. Some scientists now believe that memory evolved not primarily to store the past, but to prepare for the future, to simulate possibilities, to learn from patterns, to increase your chances of survival. This view is supported by studies on mental time travel, the ability to project yourself backward and forward in subjective time. Humans are uniquely capable of this, and it's intimately tied to a sense of self.
You can imagine your childhood and also imagine who you'll be in 20 years. You can regret and hope. But this simulation has its costs. Because your brain can't always tell the difference between real memory and imagined memory, when you obsess over a future failure or ruminate on a past mistake, the emotional systems in your brain respond similarly. You feel it again. You suffer it again. This is the double-edged sword of
memory. It grants you foresight, but it also binds you to fear. And in some mental health conditions, like anxiety and depression, this simulation becomes overwhelming. The mind loops endlessly through negative outcomes, past regrets, imagined disasters. Memory and time become tangled, trapping the self in a cycle that feels inescapable. Therapies like mindfulness aim to address this by anchoring awareness in the present, by reminding us that memory is not truth and the future is not fate. They train the brain to observe without attachment, to let the loops uncoil, to return to the breath, the body, the now, because the present moment is the only one untouched by memory. And yet, even this moment is filtered through expectation and association. Even now, your brain is referencing past patterns to interpret what's happening. You are never truly outside of memory. It is the lens through which you see the world. But maybe that's not a flaw. Maybe it's a feature, because memory doesn't just trap us in time, it also sets us free. It lets us learn, connect, plan, grow. It lets us say, I remember. And it lets us say, I will. In a quiet lab filled with the soft hum of computers and blinking monitors, something astonishing is happening. Researchers are decoding memory, not metaphorically but literally. They're mapping the electric symphony of neurons as it plays the melodies of thought. And with each breakthrough, we inch closer to a reality that once belonged to science fiction. A world where memories can be read, recorded, and possibly written. The frontier of memory research is no longer confined to biology. It now spans circuits, code, and algorithms. This is the age of neurotechnology, a fusion of neuroscience and machine learning, in which brain signals are translated into digital language. It begins with brain-computer interfaces, or BCIs, devices that detect neural activity and interpret it. The most well-known example is Elon Musk's Neuralink, a coin-sized implant designed to record and stimulate brain activity. Its early applications are therapeutic, helping people with paralysis regain communication or movement. But the long-term vision is far more radical. Full neural integration with machines. A direct connection between the brain and the digital world. If memories are patterns of activity, then in theory, BCIs could detect and replicate them. In animal studies, scientists have already demonstrated this. In one experiment, rats were trained to perform a task. Their neural activity was recorded, then played back into other rats' brains. The recipient rats performed the task without prior training, as if the memory had been transferred. This is the beginning of neural memory transfer, a process that could someday allow us to share knowledge directly, bypassing traditional learning. Imagine learning a language, a musical piece, or even a physical skill, not over years, but in seconds. Download the memory, install the skill, wake up fluent, capable, changed. But what would it mean to upload memory? Researchers have begun mapping the neural activity of the hippocampus, the brain's memory center, while subjects form and recall thoughts. With high-resolution data and machine learning, some labs are able to reconstruct images or even replay dreams based on brain signals. Crude and blurry for now, but undeniably real. The line between mind and machine is blurring. If this progress continues, we may one day record memory as easily as taking a photo. Experiences could be saved, replayed, or shared. A first kiss, a childhood laugh, the last words of someone we loved, not just remembered, but relived, with sound, color, emotion, and time. But these dreams bring ethical storms. What is privacy when your thoughts can be read? What is identity when your memories can be copied? What is grief when the presence of the past never fades? There is beauty in forgetting, in the gradual erosion of pain, in the way memory softens over time, letting us breathe, letting us move on. To store everything may be to freeze time, to trap ourselves in a permanent present. Would you truly want to relive your happiest day if it meant never experiencing a new one? Then there's the question of authenticity. If a memory can be transferred from another person, say a memory of climbing Mount Everest or winning an award, would it feel like your own? Would it change who you are? Could it be addictive? There's also the risk of manipulation. If memories can be downloaded, can they be edited? If they can be edited, can they be weaponized? Already, deepfake technologies can generate lifelike audio and video of people saying things they never said. If a digital memory file were altered, who would know? Who would decide what was real? We are walking a narrow ridge between possibility and peril, but there is another path. What if, instead of replacing memory, we enhanced it? Already, researchers are experimenting with memory prosthetics, implants that strengthen or support memory formation in individuals with brain injuries or degenerative diseases. These devices don't store memories themselves. They augment the brain's ability to form and retain them. early trials show promise. For patients with Alzheimer's or stroke-related damage, these technologies could restore a sense of continuity, a return of self. Still, we must tread carefully. The memories we form, imperfect, emotional, ever-changing, are not merely data. They are stories. They are how we make meaning in a world of chaos. And no matter how advanced the technology becomes, the essence of memory may always elude replication. Because memory is not just what happened, it's how it felt. It's who we were when it happened. It's the ache, the laughter, the silence between words. It's the life lived in the space between moments. So here we are, after wandering through the tangled networks of the brain, tracing the delicate threads of neurons and stories, glimpsing futures both wondrous and unsettling. We return quietly to the heart of it. Memory is not just a function. It's not just a mechanism of biology or a subject of science. It is the living archive of what it means to be human. We often think of memory as a tool, a way to.
Remember where we left our keys, how to get home, what someone's name is. But when you strip all that away, memory becomes something much deeper. It is the echo of every moment that shaped you. The way your mother's voice sounded when she called you in for dinner. The sudden burst of joy in a summer storm. The first time you felt heartbreak. The last time someone held your hand. These are not facts. They are truths. And they form the inner mosaic of your identity. In this way, memory is sacred. It is the only proof we have that we've lived. It doesn't matter that it's flawed, that it forgets names or misplaces dates, that it invents details or rearranges timelines. What matters is that it carries emotion. Memory doesn't preserve the past. It preserves the feeling of the past, the warmth, the sting, the awe, and that is what gives life its texture. In the absence of memory, life becomes flat. A moment experienced but not remembered is like a breath taken but never exhaled. There's no meaning in it, no story, no self. And so we hold our memories close, even the painful ones, even the ones that bring tears when no one's looking, because they remind us who we are. They remind us who we've been. And maybe, just maybe, they help point the way to who we're becoming. In many spiritual traditions, memory is seen not as a burden, but as a gift. In Buddhism, the process of remembering past lives is not just mystical, it is about understanding how the present self has been shaped by countless moments before. In Judaism, memory is sacred ritual. Remember is one of the most repeated commandments, not just for history, but for identity. To forget is to lose connection with the soul